Okay, so is the Bible a science book, a history book, or something else entirely? It's a huge question, right? Well, today we're going to dive into that, and we're going to explore this ancient text by looking at it not just as one book, but as a whole library. A library we can view through some really different lenses, like archaeology, literature, and theology.
And we're going to start somewhere you might not expect. Not with a book, but with this tiny piece of charred bone. It was found buried in the dirt of the Jordan Valley, in the ruins of an ancient city called Tal el-Hammam. But what's really unbelievable is what's on it. That's melted glass, literally fused to the bone by some kind of unimaginable heat. And when I say unimaginable, I am not kidding. The evidence shows this entire city was blasted with temperatures hotter than a volcano. We're talking hot enough to melt mud bricks and pottery into glass. Just incredible.
So you have to ask yourself, what on earth could do that? It wasn't a war, it wasn't a volcano, it wasn't any kind of normal fire. Well, a team of scientists analyzed the site, and they came to a pretty startling conclusion. This was the result of a massive cosmic airburst. Think of a comet or an asteroid exploding in the atmosphere with the power of thousands of atomic bombs. An event that, well, you could very easily describe as fire and brimstone raining down from the sky.
And this is where things get really interesting. This incredible scientific discovery has led some archaeologists to ask a really tantalizing question. Could this be the biblical city of Sodom? I mean, the parallels between what the scientists found and what the Bible describes, they're pretty hard to ignore.
The physical evidence is just staggering. We're talking about a destruction layer that's 1.5 meters thick. The soil is packed with incredibly high levels of salt, which might explain why nobody lived there for centuries afterward. They even found something called diamond-like carbon, which only forms under the kind of extreme pressure you'd get from a massive cosmic impact. But just when you think science has found a neat and tidy answer, well, the story gets a lot more complicated.
So let's step away from the archaeology for a second and look at the text itself, because it's crucial to understand how these stories were actually put together. They weren't just simple historical reports jotted down by an eyewitness.
For more than a century, scholars have been working with this idea called the documentary hypothesis. The theory is that the first 5 books of the Bible aren't from a single author at all. Instead, they're this masterfully woven tapestry of at least 4 different sources, all written at different times, each with its own unique style, vocabulary, and its own point of view. And once you understand that, it changes how you read everything.
So, for example, when you look at the Sodom story through this literary lens, the focus totally shifts. It's not just about a city getting zapped by a meteor. The story is deliberately placed right next to another one, the one where Abraham shows perfect hospitality to 3 strangers. And then you get Lot in Sodom, who offers this really twisted, horrifying version of hospitality. So the point becomes a moral one. It's about how we treat the stranger in our midst, not just a historical account of a city's fiery end.
Okay, so if the story of Sodom isn't just history, what about the other big stories? What about the very first chapter of Genesis? Is that meant to be a scientific account of how the universe began?
A source from the University of Arizona just nails it. They say science asks how, and theology asks why. They're 2 totally different disciplines, asking different questions. And trying to drag one into the other's classroom, trying to make the Bible a science textbook, is, as they put it, academically disingenuous. It completely misses the whole point of the text.
And that, right there, brilliantly illustrates what Genesis was actually trying to do. It wasn't written to explain physics. It was written to make a powerful, radical theological argument in a world that was absolutely swimming in competing gods and creation myths.
And you can literally see this argument playing out right there in the text. In all the surrounding cultures, the sun and the moon weren't just objects. They were powerful gods to be worshipped. Creation stories often started with a huge, violent battle between deities. And humans, we were usually just an afterthought, created to be slaves for the gods. Genesis 1 comes along and just systematically dismantles all of that. The sun and moon? Oh, they're just lamps God hangs in the sky. Those scary sea monsters? Just another animal God made. And humanity? We aren't slaves. We're the absolute pinnacle of creation, made in God's own image. It's a revolutionary statement.
Okay, so we've looked at science, we've looked at theology, but what about the human angle? What about when these texts dive into the messy, complicated reality of our own psychology?
Let's talk about the book of Jonah. What a character. He's one of the most complex and honestly relatable people in the entire Bible. Here's a prophet who gets a direct command from God. And what does he do? He literally runs in the opposite direction. Then when a storm hits the boat he's on, you've got these pagan sailors praying their hearts out trying to save everyone. And where's Jonah? He's asleep down below. It's this fascinating study in passivity and just trying to avoid reality.
But the ending is just a masterpiece. Jonah finally does his job, he delivers God's message, the enemy city of Nineveh actually repents, and God decides to show them mercy. And what's Jonah's reaction? He is furious, absolutely furious. He sits outside the city, just stewing in his anger because his enemies were spared. And then the book just ends right there. No clean resolution. It leaves us staring at this angry prophet, and it forces us to ask some really uncomfortable questions about our own motivations, our own prejudices, and our own hidden desires.
So where does all of this leave us? What's the big takeaway? Well, it's this. If you try to read these texts through only one lens, whether it's only science or only history or even only theology, you're going to get a really flat, incomplete picture.
The reality is that the Bible isn't just a single book that you can prove right or prove wrong. It's a library. It contains all these different genres, written over 1,000 years. It demands that we engage with it from all these different angles. The science behind Sodom doesn't cancel out the literary moral about hospitality. The theological claims of Genesis don't have to be at war with modern physics. And the deep psychological portrait of Jonah, well, that just stands on its own as a work of literary genius.
And in the end, maybe that's the real power of these texts. It's not that they give us simple, final answers. It's that they have this incredible ability to survive every new way we find to question them, from archaeology to literary theory. And they still manage to force us to ask the biggest, most profound questions about our world, our purpose, and ultimately ourselves.